All right, let's break down what's happening with the special counsel, Jack Smith, and the classified documents case against former President Donald Trump, and why this case is making headlines again. So here's the deal. Smith, who's a special counsel appointed to investigate Trump's handling of classified documents, is asking a federal appeals court to bring the case back to life. Why? Because a judge, specifically U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon, decided to throw the case out, saying that Smith was unlawfully appointed by Attorney General Merrick Garland. Now, Smith's team is basically saying, hold on, that decision doesn't align with how the Justice Department has operated for years, and it needs to be reversed. But before we get into the details, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. What Smith's team is arguing is that Judge Cannon made a serious mistake. They're saying that across the country, judges have consistently upheld the way special counsels are appointed, and Cannon's ruling goes against all of that. If her decision stands, it could mess with the way the Justice Department has been functioning for a long time and create chaos over the appointments of officials throughout the government. So prosecutors made it clear in their appeal that the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, had every right to appoint Smith as a special counsel. They argued that Cannon's ruling didn't follow Supreme Court precedent, misinterpreted the laws that allow for the special counsel's appointment, and ignored the long history of attorney generals appointing special counsels to handle significant federal investigations. Now, this appeal is just the latest twist in what many experts have seen as a pretty straightforward criminal case. The Justice Department has gathered a ton of evidence, including surveillance footage and even recordings of Trump himself, which they say shows that Trump illegally kept classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida and then obstructed efforts to get those documents back. But even with all this evidence, the case has been delayed partly because Judge Cannon has been considering various motions from Trump's legal team, which ultimately led to her dismissing the prosecution. This dismissal essentially paused everything. What's really up in the air right now is how long it will take for the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals to make a decision. Even if the appeals court decides to overturn Cannon's ruling and bring the case back, we're probably not going to see a trial before the upcoming presidential election in November. And here's where it gets even more complicated. If Trump wins the election, he could appoint a new attorney general who might just dismiss the case altogether. Plus, there's always the possibility that the case could end up in front of the U.S. Supreme on Trump's side, his campaign spokesperson, Stephen Chung, reacted by saying not only should the dismissal be upheld, but all the investigations against Trump should be dropped immediately, calling them witch hunts. To give you some background on the case, it's just one of several federal and state prosecutions Trump is facing. This particular case includes multiple felony charges accusing Trump of illegally keeping classified documents after his presidency and obstructing the government's attempts to recover them. Trump has pleaded not guilty to these charges. The big legal question at the heart of this appeal is something called the Appointments Clause in the Constitution. This clause says that certain officials like judges and ambassadors need to be appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. But it also allows for inferior officers to be appointed by the head of an agency, like the Attorney General. The Justice Department is arguing that Smith falls into this inferior officers category, meaning Garland had the authority to appoint him directly as special counsel. Smith was appointed back in November 2022 to look into both Trump's handling of the documents and his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, which led to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Both of these investigations have resulted in criminal charges, although the case related to the election is also facing some challenges, especially after a recent Supreme Court decision that granted Trump broad immunity, which could weaken that case. Trump's defense team has argued that Smith's appointment violated the Appointments Clause, and Judge Cannon agreed with them after holding a multi-day hearing. She ruled that there wasn't a specific statute that allowed Garland to appoint Smith and that Smith wasn't appointed by the president or confirmed by the Senate. But the prosecutors are pushing back hard on this, saying that there are at least 4 different laws that give the attorney general the power to appoint a special counsel like Smith. They pointed out that attorneys general have been appointing special counsels for major investigations for decades, covering everything from corruption to the Watergate scandal. The prosecutors also warned that if Cannon's ruling is allowed to stand, it would mean that every special counsel appointed from outside the Justice Department was improperly appointed, which would throw into question a whole history of special counsels handling significant federal cases. In fact, they argue if you follow Cannon's logic, it would mean that the attorney general doesn't have the power to appoint a lot of the officials who are currently serving in the Justice Department, which would cause a massive legal and governmental mess. Interestingly, this isn't the first time Cannon has been overturned by the same appeals court. Back in December 2022, they ruled that she had overstepped during the investigation by appointing an independent arbiter to review the classified documents seized by the FBI from Mar-a-Lago. So what we're seeing here is a high-stakes legal battle that could have major implications, not just for Trump, but for how the Justice Department operates and how special counsels are appointed in the future. All eyes are on the 11th Circuit to see how they'll rule on this one.